how can I see the people? I have to scroll up and down the okay.
There is a button participants.
There is a button participants.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are left with 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Yeah.
Good morning, Rajesh, Franco.
Okay.
Good morning. I don't see you.
I'm here someplace on their list. Do you remember in a Druid conference when it was the World Cup and Italy was about to play, and you put on the video while they were before they were finished speaking?
I remember very well.
I'm sorry. That's the that was funny. I thought that was a distinctive measure in terms of football culture from Italy. I learned that.
Well, one would say these are the important things, but I don't dare to say that.
But yeah, here we're here to learn about more serious matters. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you again. Great to see you.
2 minutes.
This is such a good dynamic within Globalist. Certainly bringing in new blood and new dynamism.
Absolutely.
Kiran, I think we can start. Please unmute.
Hello. Very good morning to all the participants who are attending from South and North America. And a very good afternoon to all those who are attending from the London time zone. And a very warm evening to the participants attending from South Asia or Indian subcontinent. So I welcome you all for just a minute. Can you see the slides? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I welcome you all for this Freeman Centenary lecture series. We have successfully completed 6 lectures and received an excellent feedback. Now I welcome you to the lecture number 7, that is on different approaches to national systems of innovation. Today, we have two very distinguished scholars with us. Professor Franco Malerba is going to chair this session, and Dr. Hezron Makundi is going to speak. He's the speaker of the day, who is going to talk on different approaches to national systems of innovation. Many of you who have attended the previous lecture series needs no further introduction, but for the benefit of those who are attending it for the very first time, this lecture series is organized in honor of Professor Christopher Freeman, who is considered as the founding father of modern innovation studies. 2021 is his birth centenary year. He was born on 11th September 1921. So this particular series is organized by very few greatly enthusiastic scholars who are the alumni of PhD network, PhD Globalist network. Globalist is founded by Professor Bentoke Lundwell. This lecture series is co-hosted by UNU Merit, Netherlands. So we have total 13 lectures and 38 speakers. This lecture series spans across 3 months up to 1st of April. As I already mentioned, this is organized by the young scholars. The main objective of this lecture series is to attract the young scholars, so the opportunity is given to the early career researchers in innovation systems, and the discussion is usually is carried out by the senior scholars, very distinguished scholars in the innovation systems approach. The objective is to integrate the senior scholars with the young scholars who are working in innovation studies, so that we attract young blood into the innovation systems and further the horizons of innovation systems by adding more dimensions to the perspective. And also the objective is to embolden the early career researchers. As many of you are aware, the innovation systems approach is highly interdisciplinary in nature. So the idea is also to promote an interdisciplinary approach in the innovation systems framework in their research. So this is our team of 38 speakers. A few words about the chair of the day and also the speaker. As I mentioned, Professor Franco Malerba needs no introduction for those who are working in the area of economics of innovation and innovation systems. He has contributed significantly or pioneered the sectoral systems of innovation. He has many academic distinctions, and the list will go on. So it is not sufficient for me to sort of give a brief introduction about Franco within 5 minutes. Just to list a few of his credentials, he is currently the Professor of Applied Economics and President of ICRIOS, Bocconi University. He has been on the editor or editorial board of many journals. Currently, he is the editor of Industrial and Corporate Change. He is an advisory editor to Research Policy and the associate editor to Journal of Evolutionary Economics. These are the 3 top journals in the area of economics of innovation. He was a former president of European Association of Research in Industrial Economics, former president of International Schumpeter Society, and he has been a member of many advisory boards of internationally reputed institutes such as Max Planck Institute of Economics, Spruce Sussex, CRIC Manchester University, EU high-level panels on new innovation indicators for Europe and for a new European innovation policy. He was the winner of the very prestigious Schumpeter Prize in 2021 for his book, Innovation and the Evolution of Industries. The speaker of the day is Hezron Makundi, a very young, distinguished scholar. He is currently a lecturer and coordinator of postgraduate development studies at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. He worked previously at the Tanzania Commission for Science and Technology. He has quite a diverse background. He has obtained his master's degree at Crewe, Sussex, and he went on to do PhD from the University of Milan in social sciences. So his background is quite mixed in the sense that his expertise comes from natural sciences, education, and innovation studies. He has extensive research experience in the evaluation of development coordination program, particularly in the area of science, technology, and innovation. So the entire program is being recorded for academic purpose. The Zoom platform is provided by the United Nations University Maastricht Economic and Social Research Institute on Innovation and Technology. We are currently live streaming this particular lecture. So as far as the questions is concerned, I request all the participants to drop the questions via text box personally to me. And now I invite Professor Franco Malerba to chair the session and conduct the proceedings. Over to you, Franco.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I think it's a great initiative, and I congratulate the organizers for this great series of lectures. I am also part of the Globalist community, and I see that the Globalist community is really so vibrant in all these initiatives, and I hope to see you in person in Costa Rica in November for the Globalist conference. The topics of today that Hezron will present is a different approaches to national system of innovation. And I would like to rephrase a little bit the title, just to make my point and introduce Hezron's lecture. Instead of different approaches, I would call it various dimensions of innovation systems. In a sense, a national innovation system is one type of innovation system, as there are other types of innovation system. So rather putting in terms of differences, I put it in terms of variety of innovation systems, or if you want to say it in a different way, different angles in which you can see and examine innovation systems. National innovation system is the most famous, the most popular, the most studied type of innovation systems, but as Hezron will discuss, there are other types of innovation systems that are important for searching or examining specific type of questions. So let me just, as an introduction, say that all these different, or let's say various dimensions of innovation system come from the building blocks of evolutionary theory and the innovation system approach. In a sense, you can see the richness of the innovation system dimensions if you look at the roots of evolutionary theory innovation system. Let me just very briefly say why, and then give the floor to Hezron. So first of all, learning. Learning is a key element of evolutionary theory and innovation system, and learning can take place in different ways and different trajectories, is more or less local. So learning is one key element. The second element is knowledge, and knowledge accumulation and capability building, that are both key elements on evolutionary theory and innovation systems. And you discussed a lot these elements and these building blocks in the past lectures. And then a third element is that there are various types of actors that play a role in innovation system, and that evolutionary theory puts it as a center. There are firms, but there are also universities, public research organizations, the government. So in a sense, there is a lot of heterogeneity among actors that affect innovation. And these actors interact in various ways. There is cooperation, there is a mutual learning, but there is also competition and market process. So there's various ways. And then institutions are an important, a key element of evolutionary theory and innovation systems. So all these elements are at the base of national innovation systems. And you know, Chris Freeman has written so much about the role of institutions, the role of various actors in national innovation systems, the heterogeneity, and also if you think another friend, Bentoke Lundvall, in his book, The Learning Economy and the Economics of Hope, also he has discussed all these elements. But go back to the building blocks. So if learning by bounded rational actors that search locally, and knowledge is tacit, and so there is imperfect transfer, and there is more intense interaction locally, and you have local institutions, then you have the emergence of local clusters, regional systems. And again, comes in a type of innovation system that is regional and not national. Or if learning take place and actors act in specific technological, production, and demand context or domains, then you have the emergence of sectoral systems, because in a sense, the technology, production, and demand context in which actors, all these actors act, is very different from one context to the other. If the sectoral contexts are part of the vertical links of production, in which there are various stages in which the organization may span globally, then you have the emergence of global value chain. So you see, from the very roots of evolutionary theory and innovation system, you may have not only the emergence of national innovation system, but also the emergence of local systems of innovation, or sectoral systems of innovations, or global value chain. The roots are the same, but the dimensions are different. So the point I want to make is that there is a strong heterogeneity in the innovation systems. And the strong heterogeneity comes from the basic building blocks of evolutionary theory and the innovation system approach. And a lot of these systems have a complex structure that we need to examine in details, because a system is composed by elements that interact but also are important to take into account. And also the system had to be examined in a dynamic fashion, not in a static fashion. This is very important in a sense. While we like for analytical reasons to be static, to examine the system at a certain point of time, but when you talk about innovation, you talk about a train in movement, a dynamic process, which complicates, of course, the type of analysis, but has to be taken into account. So this is my key point, and the second point that is related to the first one is that there are different dimensions of innovation system, but these dimensions are interrelated. They're not independent. It is not correct to say that you have regional systems, that you have national system, and just sectoral system compose a national system. A national system affects the sectoral systems, and in a sense they're interdependent, and we have to take into account the type of relationships that there are among the system. I'll go back to that maybe in the discussion. But so to conclude, before giving the floor to Hezron, so if you take into account this, then you need to be interdisciplinary in your examining of innovation system, because when you bring in institutions, when you bring in technology, you bring in different ways that have to be combined in the examining of innovation system. And this is the lesson of Chris Freeman. Chris Freeman, in one of his writings that we published in ICC 2 years ago, said that there are 5 systems, or he wrote it, 5 systems that are important: the scientific system, the technological system, the economic system, the political system, and the cultural system. And all these systems together compose an innovation system. So interdisciplinarity is at the core of innovation system, and also gives the richness to this approach, because of this richness of breaking boundaries of narrow disciplinary limits. Okay, I think now it's time to give the floor to Hezron to his lecture, and I look forward to hear from you, Hezron.
Thank you very much, Franco. It is a pleasure to be here, and I really congratulate and appreciate the organizers for making this a possibility. I'm going now, trying to share my screen. I think it is already shared. Eh? Yes. So this is the outline of my lecture. I will introduce the idea of having innovation systems, as Franco said, those which are complementary to the national system. Specifically, I will have a lot of discussion on the sectoral systems of innovation, and I will even go into the agricultural innovation system approach as one of the examples or the models within the sectoral system of innovation. Then I'll talk about the regional systems of innovation, global value chain, and then I'll conclude the lecture. Maybe it is also important to indicate in my introduction that I'm also part of the Science, Technology, Policy Research, Science, Technology, Innovation Policy Research Organization, STIPRO. And this is also part of the Globalist, but also AfricaList. It is also to show the importance of having the Globalist network, the AfricaList networks, which gives mentorship and support you junior scholars. So I have received a lot of support and mentorship from Bitrina Diamete and other senior scholars within the network, and this is very useful. Now, in the past lectures, we have had extensive discussion on the national system of innovation. This is a very popular concept, very widely applied whenever somebody studies innovation. And it offers a very comprehensive analysis of innovation as a systemic process. So in this lecture, we are not really going to talk about the national system of innovation because we have other alternatives to the analysis of discussion on innovation, which is also in a systemic way. So we will try to look into those ones. But most important, when you discuss innovation system as a systemic process, there is a number of parameters which you need to take into consideration. So the geography or the geographical dynamic should be in place, and geographical, of course, a nation is also a geographical entity, but there are other geographical dimensions which should be then considered. So among them is like a global, considering innovation as something which happens at the global scale. So later on in the lecture, I will discuss about the then global value chain. And this is also a concept which has been linked also with innovation system with some scholars like Pietrobelli and Rabelotti. There are subnational or regional systems of innovations. So innovation system as a systemic process, but happening at the level below the nation. So it could be within a district, a city, or just a small geographical area. And there are some supranational systems of innovation, which are not necessarily global, but they happen beyond a single country nation. So for example, a paper or a study by Susanna Borras in 2004 discussing the European system of innovation. So it is rather beyond one nation, but it is also not really global as it could be. So these are the different dimensions which are then determined by the geographical dynamics when you study innovation. But apart from the geography, there are also the sectoral dynamics as extensively analyzed and discussed by Franco. I read his article in the Research Policy in 2002, his chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Innovation, and several other publications which he did with other scholars like Bresci or Sinego and others. And these provides a very insightful approach of innovation system from the sectoral perspective. So they look at issues like the sector-specific dynamics, characteristics of firms across the various sectors, etc. But apart from the sectoral systems of innovation, there are also technological dynamics like argued by Carson, 1995, where you have now the technological system of innovation. We will discuss also about them later in the lecture. There is something which is in common with all these systems, as said earlier by Franco, that national systems of innovation, sectoral systems of innovation, regional systems of innovation, and technological systems of innovation. All of them are focused on studying innovation, but with a lot of emphasis on learning. So learning is a very important parameter on all these innovation studies, which took a systemic approach. Another important aspect of these systemic approaches to innovation studies is also they look at innovation as a complex, a non-linear, and an interactive process. So I think this is contrary to the non-systemic approaches to innovation studies, which include the linear models, etc. So the complexity of innovation, the non-linearity of innovation as a process, but also the interactive nature of the actors who are involved in the innovation process becomes one important characteristics of all these approaches or models which we are talking about. And in many ways, when you look at studies of innovation which use the national system approach, the sectoral system approach, the regional and technological system, they use the ex post historical analysis when they try to examining the diffusion, production of knowledge across these systems which they deal with. Another important parameter, which was also earlier mentioned by Franco, is the interdisciplinarity of innovation studies. So all these approaches which we are talking about, apart from the national systems, are also in an interdisciplinary manner. And there's a lot of, like I said, complementarity and interdependence between them. So in a number of ways, as we will say later, when you talk about or when you assess the regional system of innovation, some institutions which are relevant for the regional systems of innovation are also the same ones which are also at the national level. So there is a lot of interdependence between these particular models. Now, starting with the sectoral system of innovation, as by Malerba 2002 and other studies, the theoretical domain behind the sectoral system of innovation in particular comes from the evolutionary economics. So studies by Richard Nelson, Giovanni Dossi, Metcalfe, Franco Malerba himself with Nelson, Onisego, and Winter, for example, in the book which they published in 2016 and Cambridge, they have tried to unpack the modern evolutionary theories, and from there you can get a lot of concepts which are then relevant for the sectoral systems of innovation. So based on these key theories, evolutionary theories, but also the innovation system approach, which was then championed by Chris Freeman, Bengt Åke Lundvall, Charles Edquist, and other scholars within this field, then we come up with now the sectoral system of innovation. So the SSI is highly connected or linked to these two main conceptual or theoretical approaches. And to study the sectoral system of innovation, you need to look into the change and transformations which happens in sectors, but also links and the dependencies, which then defines the boundaries of the sectors. I will talk more in details about these two key parameters in the coming slides. So in terms of change and transformation within sectors, here, Malerba and the other scholars drew upon the evolutionary theories, like I said. So, for example, in Schumpeter, you have Mach 1 and Mach 2. And in Schumpeter, Mach 1, of course, it's more of like a broadening. So it is, is it broadening or deepening now? I'm confusing. But Mach 2 particularly is creative accumulation. This is more with those who already are innovation. They are innovating, so they have accumulated a lot of knowledge, which is then going to be applied in their coming innovation, which makes it difficult for those who are new or are trying to enter that particular sector. And this is a characteristic of some specific sectors like semiconductors, where the entry barriers to innovation or to the production system becomes very difficult. So the aspect of cumulativeness in those particular sectors becomes prominent. And that then suggests that sectors differs in a way. So this is to say that there are some variations or differences across or between sectors in terms of innovation and how innovation happens or occurs. Another thing which brings dynamics across sectors comes from the conceptualization of industry life cycle by scholars like Atterbach and Kepler, but also the concept of technological regime, which was defined by Dick Nelson and Winter. I think there was a famous publication by two of them talking about technological regime, which, as I will discuss later, it was then further expanded into concepts like socio-technical regimes, etc. There's an issue of variation in opportunity and the appropriability of innovation by firms across the different sectors. So in some sectors, it's very difficult for firms to appropriate the innovation. So like to protect and to leverage the gains from the innovation they do, contrary to other sectors. And these variations brings a lot of dynamics, which makes then the distinction between sectors in terms of how they can perform in innovation. And that makes the importance of having the studies of innovation in a sectoral dimension then. So going back now to the links and dependencies, which then define sectoral boundaries, there is variation in terms of knowledge and the technological dimension of any given sectoral system, which means the kind of knowledge which is being utilized, used, or applied in a given sector differs. So it differs from one sector to another. So a sectoral system has a unique kind of knowledge and technological field or domain which is relevant or applicable to it. So therefore there are boundaries. And these boundaries are not only in terms of the kind of knowledge and the kind of technology, but even the kind of links and how the artifacts, the technology, activities, actors, the way they interact with each other, the way they have the complementarity between each other. This one is different. And like, again, Franco said in the introduction, the boundaries can either be static or dynamic. So they can be evolving over time, or they can just be in a very static manner. Now, like I said earlier, the sectoral system of innovation has benefited a lot from the evolutionary literature, which the evolutionary literature suggests that the firm level knowledge, the knowledge which is embedded within a firm, is highly idiosyncratic, which means that after it has been absorbed by the firm, it is accumulated, and the ability of a firm to accumulate varies, and this also varies across sectors. So you find that some sectors are more knowledge intensive than others. Some sectors have firms which depend so much, or they gain so much from opportunities of technological knowledge generated by institutions like universities and others, but also the cumulative nature of knowledge also vary across sectors. So there are some sectors, like I said, like semiconductors, where knowledge becomes very highly cumulative, that if you do some things today, you can then do incremental innovation, and then that knowledge which you have gained from these activities of today then becomes useful or relevant or applicable to the future kind of innovation activities which you need to do. So to conclude now, based on Malerba's studies and the publications in this area, sectors and technology differs greatly in terms of knowledge base and the learning process, which then defines their capacity to innovate. So there are variations across sectors and across technologies in terms of the ability to innovate, the kind of innovation, the propensity to innovate, etc., etc. And this then defines how the sectoral systems of innovation are supposed to be researched or studied. Now, the building blocks of the sectoral systems of innovation include the actors, and these can be either individuals, they can be firms, they can be public organizations, semi-public organizations, etc. And these actors are highly heterogeneous. They have different beliefs, they have different expectations according to sector. So in one sector, you find that the kind of actors which are within that sector are very different from the kind of actors which are found in another sector. So say like actors within manufacturing have some features or characteristics which are very different from actors which are in the sector, for example, of pharmaceutical or another kind of a sector. There is also a variation in terms of the nature and the speed and the kind of learning, but also the innovation process, the way innovation process occurs. Like I said earlier, for example, in some sectors, innovation is highly driven by intensive R&D, while in other sectors, that is not the case. The actors within a sectoral system of innovation tend to interact through market and non-market relations. So you have the market kind of interaction, that you have licensing agreement, you have the trade and other kind of market-driven transactions, but in some cases also, actors within a sectoral system of innovation may learn from each other, for example, through informal interaction and other kind of non-market activities. For example, the reverse engineering, people learn from technology which has been developed by others, etc. The channel for interaction between actors in a sectoral system of innovation include communication, exchange, cooperation, competition, and command. And all these communication processes or these channels are shaped by institutions. So we will also have to discuss about institutions in the sectoral systems of innovation. So just to extend the discussion about actors within the sectoral systems of innovation, like I said earlier, some sectoral systems of innovation like automotive are dominated by large firms. So you don't have like SMEs within the automotive industry. Maybe you could have suppliers of small parts for automotive, but normally the automakers are largely the large firms. But there are some firms which are dominated by small firms. I mean, some sectors. Also, in some sectors like pharmaceuticals and electronics, the role of university and the public R&D institutions becomes very crucial. But yeah, textile does not really rely so much on public R&D institution for its innovation or performance. So you see the variation between these two sectors. Like I said earlier, there are some sectors which attract some very specific type of actors. Like there are sectors which tend to attract venture capitalists, while others normally don't do or don't engage such kind of actors quite often than others. Some sectors do have actors who are net suppliers of technology, like those who are involved in computer, while others are largely the users of technology like metallurgy. And this is one of the findings by Malerba's publication in 2004. Networks within sectoral systems are defined by links, which then define the interdependencies among the related actors or players within institutions. And this one varies across sectors, and it changes also over time. So links and networks tend to be either in a formal way or sometimes informal. So this is how players within the sectoral system of innovation interact with each other. So they can interact in a formal manner, but sometimes also informally. And yeah, the notion of user-supplier interaction, for example, defines the role of demand in the innovation process, as it was argued by Michael Porter's work of 1976. So institutions in a sectoral systems of innovation include norms, routines, habits, established practices, rules, laws, and standards. And one important thing to note here is that the rules in pharmaceutical industry are different from the rules in automotive industry. Some rules, of course, but there are those rules which are cross-cutting. So if it is to define a patent, like to register a patent, maybe there are common or similar rules across all the sectors, but there are some specific laws and rules, how people works. In some sectors, for example, the tacit knowledge becomes much more useful than in other sectors, etc. Institutions can be binding and sometimes non-binding. They can be informal or formal. So there are various forms of institutions which defines how actors within a sectoral system of innovation interact or engage with each other. And like I said earlier, these can be also in a form of market activities or even non-market activities. So these variations as well brings the dynamics which signifies the importance of using a sectoral system approach to study innovation. So a number of institutions which are applicable or relevant to the national system of innovation are also applicable to the sectoral systems of innovation. But yes, you can have institutions like the national laws and rules which are governing innovation within a given national territory. But there are some laws and rules which are across a certain sector. So whether you are doing ICT in India or you are doing it in the Silicon Valley, so it is Bangalore or Silicon Valley, some rules of doing software development and the software market or software industry can be very common all over the world. Anywhere in the world where you are doing this kind of an industry, there are some specific institutions which tend to be much relevant within a sector, but even across the broad geographical localities. Now, after discussing the broad aspects of sectoral system of innovation, I will specifically now go to the agricultural systems of innovation or agricultural innovation system, the AIS, or a popular model approach to sectoral system of innovation, which has been there for a long time. So the evolution of studies of AIS came from studies on participatory research approach by, for example, Robert Chambers at Sussex, studies on technology development, for example, by scholars like Farrington in Marine, training and visit systems, agricultural technology transfer, a book by Rogers on diffusion of innovation, and many other, I would say, linear approaches or linear models of innovation, from which, of course, the emphasis has been so much on, for example, promoting the R&D expenditure by the public sector, or improving the R&D capabilities in country, nation, or given territories. So this is how the agricultural innovation system evolved. The two dominant or most recent conceptualization approaches to the AIS then were the agricultural knowledge and information system, the AKIS, which was introduced by Rowling in 2009, but it was largely influenced by the Klein and Rosenberg model, which is considered to be the very important milestone in the linkage between innovation studies or studies of innovation system and the agricultural innovation studies. So the systemic approach to agricultural innovation was brought in by the work of Rosenberg and Klein. But I think if you read, for example, the article by Samberg, it's like the concept of agricultural innovation system and agricultural knowledge and information system. So AKIS and AIS were rather developed in a complementary manner, but they had also influenced each other, and there's a lot of also similar kind of features between these two systems. And of course, in the end, the AIS then was more advanced, and it became the more used or applied approach or model to study agricultural innovation, or a sectoral system approach to the agriculture sector. So the national system of innovation approach was very influential in the development of the AIS concept. So scholars, for example, Martin Bell and Eric Arnold from, I think, SPRU and Technopolis had argued in a strong emphasis of the role of institution in studying agricultural innovation. And yeah, the other important point to emphasize here is that the AIS was rather derived from emphasis on agricultural research systems, while AKIS was rather from scholars who are more interested in the agricultural extension system. So the analysis of agricultural innovation systems has been developed in different kind of approaches or dimensions. People conduct institutional analysis. So the influence of institutions as enablers or constrained to the innovation performance or the performance of the system. The social network analysis to map the linkages between actors within the agricultural innovation system. Some people do the innovation journeys and history. And of course, the benchmarking approach, which is also very useful in the national system approach, where you try to look at how agricultural systems or agricultural research systems performs at the different localities or different parts of the world. So approaches like the use of R&D indicators, for example, is also used in this aspect. One important also thing to note with the AIS is the fact that the concept of agricultural innovation system has not really been engaged in terms of conceptualization. So most of the studies in this particular area has been more into the empirical research. So you find people doing their research or their study on a given system, try to analyze, for example, the institutional dynamics or the social networks between actors to promote the agricultural development or innovation also. So the conceptualization process itself is largely dependent on the sectoral system of innovation approach and the national system of innovation approach. So the limitation with the agricultural innovation system is its own lack of conceptual development, but it is highly empirical, and it has also been widely applied in researching the development of agricultural innovation and research in particular. So yeah, that is what I had today to say about the AIS. Now to the geographical approach to innovation system, and with the emphasis, of course, on the subnational levels. As we know, the performance of innovation has not always been homogeneous within countries. So you have a country which is highly innovative like Germany, but you go to some parts of Germany and you realize that the level of innovation within or between those areas then is different. So based on this variation, scholars have tried to do research and unpack the specific geographical localities other than nation, which tend to show some dynamics or variation, and to investigate what is special about these areas and how the innovation process happened, how have they become so innovative or even less innovative. And as a result, now we have a concept such as industrial district, a concept which was introduced by Marshall, the concept of industrial clusters introduced by Michael Porter, in regional system of innovation, which is like the more popular within this localization, conceptualization, which brings a number of different concepts as well. So some scholars will talk about learning region, innovation milieu, local production systems, etc. So if you read, for example, the work of Dolorix and Pato 2005, you will learn all these kinds of different conceptualizations, which talks about the local or the subnational systems of innovation. So going to the regional system of innovation or the subnational, so the role of geography becomes very important. That Polanyi, for example, 1958, argues that it is very difficult for tacit knowledge to be exchanged over a long distance. So when people learn how to do things, they can teach people who are close to them rather than transferring that kind of knowledge to people who are far or distant. So the tacit net itself has that element of being embodied into people and become then difficult to be transferred in a long distance. So that is very important. But Lundvall and Johnston emphasize on the role of interaction and learning. So the whole scholarship on doing interaction and innovating, or the DUI model, was evolved from this work of Lundvall, and you can appreciate now the role of people having engaged in interaction, and then the things which they keep on doing as part of them being innovators or promoting the innovation process. So this makes the geography very important, that knowledge which is accumulated within people does not really get to be transferred far in a very easy way. So the spatial proximity then becomes very key to an effective production, but also transmission of knowledge, as argued by Hashem and other scholars in 2003. So the regional systems of innovations are hinged on issues of the importance of geographical proximity, which brings a lot of benefit associated to localization advantages, the spatial concentration, and also the local norms, so the behavior, etc. So in the end, we get within nations specific regions or areas which are very successful in terms of innovation. So in California, the Silicon Valley, which is connected to the University of California, Berkeley, but also Stanford University, I think it is very successful, particularly in the area of ICT and electronics. But there's also a region in Italy called Emilia Romagna. I think it's a place close to Bologna. So cities like Bologna, Modena, Ferrara, and so these areas are very famous for automotive industry. So cars like Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, Ducati, and so are made in this area. But also in Germany, the Baden-Württemberg is also very popular for like making of Mercedes cars with the Daimler, software companies like SAP. So it's also a very innovative, small concentrated area. And many others. So the Chungkangkun area within the Haidan district in Shanghai also linked it to universities like Peking and Tsinghua. And so regional systems of innovation comes from that kind of a concentration of specific areas where you have a spatial concentration of firms which are highly innovative. And based on that, people could go to those specific areas and do their research to study how innovation occurs, what is the role of the interaction which occurs in that small concentrated area, and what does it mean for the systemic approach to study innovation. Again, I have to put a reminder that these regional system of innovation and their key features or aspects are also applicable to the national system and vice versa. So yes, you could say the Silicon Valley is very innovative, is famous, but some aspects of policies which promote innovation drawn from the federal government of the United States make other parts of the United States also innovative. So yeah, in Boston, you also have some hub or clusters which becomes also innovative, and in some other parts of the United States of America. So this is also the case for Germany. If you go to Bavaria and the other parts of Germany, specific parts of Germany, you can find innovation. Not necessarily the entire country, but relatively, of course, Germany as a nation is considered to be one of the highly innovative countries in the world. And this is different from other countries. And so those national characteristics, national institutions, national policies, and actors who are at the national level cannot be ignored when you study regional systems of innovation. Scholars of national systems of innovation like Michael Porter have brought about the success stories of specialized industrial agglomeration regions or areas where you have a concentrated network of SMEs and other players which promotes innovation and industrialization. Normally, the regional systems of innovation are also propagated by availability of localized resources. For example, you can have highly specialized labor, which is probably developed or produced by some universities which surround those particular areas. You could have some subcontractors which are there to serve these manufacturers or innovators. A supply system can be very effective in that particular sector, sometimes in a particular sector or in that area in a sectoral holistic way. There are even issues like local tradition, for example, attitudes, diligence, and support organization, which could also be local, but sometimes even national. So those regional or local resources which are there to promote innovations becomes then the backbone of the regional systems of innovation. So these specific district industrial areas become successful because of those localized advantages which they have, which are not available elsewhere, even within the country or a specific country as well. So another approach to study innovation other than sectoral system and regional system is the technological system of innovation, defined by a network of actors and institutions who are involved in the generation, diffusion, and utilization of specific technologies. So a technological system of innovation, the key word is there is technology, but again, it is a system of innovation. And like any system of innovation, just like Freeman, Lundvall, and other scholars talks about innovation as a systemic process, you always have to have actors, you have to have institutions, and these actors have to be governed by those institutions. They have to interact, and in the end, the main aim is to engage with knowledge in order to produce innovation. So the technological systems of innovation are highly inspired by the approaches to define the taxonomy of industrial activities, but also technological processes. So the Pavid taxonomy, the work of Marsili, as well, has came up with all these concepts like Pavid taxonomy, but also Marsili's technological paradigms, where the main issue there is that a certain group of technology, for example, sometimes coming even from different kind of tech sectors, tend to share some common features. So technologies of a certain group, so like machines, also instruments, not necessarily only applicable to one sector, but sometimes even to different sector, but in some cases also to different geographical localities, they share some common features. And based on this, then you get now the technological systems of innovation. But I think in my opinion, but also inspired by Franco, the sectoral systems are highly, can be highly considered as an antecedent of the sectoral system, because yes, they examine the sectoral patterns of innovation, but then they don't really take into considerations issues of network actors, but also institutions. So it is more on technology and the common features around some technologies in terms of how they evolve and how innovation happens within those technologies and other characteristics. But the institutional dynamics and issues of network among actors and so might not be one of the key aspects of the technological systems of innovation. So studies on technological systems of innovation, like I said, evolved from the example, the conceptualization of long waves by Kondrativ, where you have the techno-economic paradigms also by the work of Freeman and Perez, technological paradigms evolving into technological trajectories by Giovanni Dossi. And in the recent years, scholars, for example, at the STEPS Center, which combines IDS and SPRU, have developed this concept into what we call the sustainability pathways. So they do studies of innovation in terms of the socially and I mean, trying to assess the development, the barriers to the development of socially and environmental desirable technologies, for example, renewable energy and other green technologies. And Frank Gill has even advanced this concept into what we call the multi-level perspective. So in terms of talking about technological regimes, it is more like the social technical. So you bring in the society to these particular studies rather than looking at technology as machines themselves. Now, the global value chain, and then we will talk about how this global value chain concept links up to the innovation system. The value chain, as we know, occurs when the production of delivery of a particular service is broken into different activities which are carried out in, by actors in different localities. Of course, when it is global, then it is across different countries across the world, even a continent. And this comes when firms, particularly multinational corporations, decide to outsource some activities and then decide to focus on only those activities which they have core competencies on. So if it is a textile industry, the factory does not really engage in, for example, growing cotton or developing the dyes, but rather a certain aspect of textile. Sometimes it's interesting that textile, big apparel companies, for example, they focus even more on like marketing research and activities like that, and then they do outsourcing of the entire production process. So in the end, you find a certain multinational company in the textile industry in which the cotton growing is something happening somewhere in Burkina Faso or maybe in Tanzania. The production of those apparel happening, for example, in Bangladesh or India, and then now the product is sold all over the world with the outlet chains. But yes, the design activities may be happening at the headquarters of that apparel company, etc., etc. So as a result of that, you have backward and forward linkages between different actors, sometimes firms, even farmers and players across all those different stages of the production chain of that particular product. And even the R&D and innovation activities can be chunked into different layers or to be done by different actors. So like farming of cotton, for it to happen in a very proper way, yes, maybe the multinational corporation which is producing the apparel can be influential in terms of the quality of the cotton, but also the farmer somewhere in Burkina Faso, like I said, could have a role or a stake in terms of the way he do his cotton farming, and therefore the quality of his or her cotton then will be at his hands, how innovative that person becomes. So global value chains are highly associated with interactions, capability building, and the upgrading of firms, farmers, and other players across the value chain itself. So there should be, for example, standards to adhere to, different ways of doing things, different kind of breeds and seeds, even different equipment and machines to do the processing, and that means innovation then. So these players at the different stages of the value chain can be then empowered or upgraded to perform activities which were then could have not been the case if they were not really tapped into this kind of a value chain. Myself and the colleague at Stipro have also done a study in this particular area, for example, looking at the avocado farming and how the new players in the avocado production process, for example, to sell fresh avocados in the European market, but at the same time also to produce some avocado oil for different kind of industries. It transformed the avocado farming activities among the farmers, for example, in the northern part of Tanzania. So they have learned how to grow different varieties of avocado. They learn how to do the picking, the growing, the processing, the handling, and everything, even the packaging, sorting, grading, and everything. And that is a new innovation which was only brought to them as a result of their engagement in the value chain. Global value chain also have enabled the different players in the value chain to have more market opportunities, because then you have a global market, and this brings revenue to them, and the revenue which they get from the value chain activities can then be reinvested in doing innovative activities. So you could have more harvest, there's a bigger market, you sell more, you have more money, then you can buy, for example, a tractor which will then mechanize your farming activities more than it would have been before. Now, like I said in the introduction, Petrobelli and Rabelotti are among the scholars who have done a lot of work in this particular area, especially in terms of linking global value chain as a concept to the innovation system, because there has been a lot of studies on global value chain. They study the chains, they study the actors within the chain, but they pay much less attention to the institutional context, and particularly the role of institutional context, for example, national institutions and other kind of institutions in improving productivity and innovation. So the work of Pietrobelli and Rabelotti then bring in now the aspect of the innovation system in terms of how the national, for example, players or the national institution can be improving innovation, for example, across the value chain. So talking about, for example, institutions on standard, metrology, and so can improve, for example, the testing process. Institutions which promote issues of traceability can then bring transparency and therefore a better market performance of the players and so. And also national institutions or institutions within the national innovation system are very useful in, for example, reducing transactional cost, promoting the flow of information and therefore reducing information asymmetry and other uncertainties which could not be captured by the global value chain approach to the study of innovation. So just to have my own southern perspective in a global value chain and innovation, it is very important for the scholarship and studies on global value chain to kind of mitigate the captive relation and allow the space for innovation among the players, particularly at the bottom of the value chain. But also more emphasis on how upgrading of local suppliers can be done, for example, through FDI, but also within the value chain itself. So how these the local actors can be then engaged in promoting innovation among the locals or those who are in the south or in the developing economies who are involved in the value chain. As well, the studies on global value chain and the innovation system could also assist in the improvement of innovation system to reduce the transactional cost. But I think it is important also to have broader geographical and sectoral aspects of innovation system when someone does the studies of a global value chain. So these are just my reflections on the global value chain, which is then supposed to be linked to the studies of innovation system, and it is among the systemic approaches to innovation system studies, although it becomes a little bit difficult to position. So I would say Rabelotti's work has done a lot of efforts to link two different concepts, which then can improve the aspects of innovation when studying production system at the global level in a global value chain approach. So my lecture seems to end earlier than 1 hour, but maybe this will also allow time for discussion. As I have discussed in the lecture, it is very important to acknowledge the interdependency and the complementarity of the various system approach to innovation studies. So the sectoral system of innovation, national system of innovation, regional system of innovation, technological system of innovation. There's a lot of interdependencies, but also complementarity between these systems. Although, of course, as we know, the national system of innovation has been the most widely applied and the most famous among these approaches. Sometimes within the studies, it is also important to define the boundary when you apply these analytical approaches, for example, the spatial coverage, the technological coverage, etc. But of course, for like national systems, it is normally clear that when someone studies a national system, then the scope there is a national. But in some cases, of course, if you are interested particularly in agriculture, maybe the sectoral system of innovation, which is then in the direction of the agricultural system of innovation, can be much more useful or relevant for you to conduct your research or your analysis of the innovation process, barriers, challenges, etc. Because maybe the national system in that regard could be much more broader, and it might not capture some, sector-specific aspect. And in some cases, of course, as for the case of the regional system, maybe there are some lessons which could be drawn from a certain specific region which tend to be very highly innovative, or even a region one area which is not innovative, for you to know why is it not innovative. Maybe there's a lot of investment happening there, but then the level of innovation is very limited and you want to study. So maybe you don't want to study the entire national system of innovation. Yes, you could even find out that there are some national strategies, policies, institutions which could be the barrier or the lack of linkages or infrastructural constraints which are within the national road network, etc. But there are still some specific behavioral, cultural, and local issues which you could capture when you do a regional approach to innovation system. I also wish to recommend the consideration of adapting some southern context. For example, studies of a national system, regional, even sectoral system of innovation sometimes tend to ignore some variations or some issues within the South. For example, the R&D within developing countries like in sub-Saharan Africa is highly informal, and the informality aspect can be not really well captured. Weaknesses in the intellectual property systems. So for example, if you do, for example, R&D indicators and you look into the patent metrics, then you could have a picture of some areas of the world not being innovative at all, but maybe not necessarily true that those areas are not innovative, but maybe they just don't have a behavior or a tendency of patenting, or maybe the patent system is very weak to capture some of the innovation which happens in those areas. So those are my reflections in the end to conclude the lecture. So I think I'm done with the lecture itself.
Franco, can you unmute? Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Hezron, for this excellent presentation. It was very clear, very broad, but also very, very precise. So, I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I think you clarified a lot of relevant aspects of the different dimensions, call it in this way, different dimensions of innovation systems. And as it has become clear from your lecture, basically you have a lot of interaction between this type of innovation system, because as I said, maybe as you clearly pointed out, the national systems are composed by sectoral systems, by specific sectoral systems, but also the sectoral systems of a specific sector is highly affected by national dimensions, you know, be regulation, be public policy, be national culture or whatever, as well as by clusters that may be present in a specific country. So these different dimensions of innovation system are related. They are not independent, and I think it's very important to take this into account when you do research or when you examine innovation systems. Let me just comment this very interesting presentation by saying that, and starting from sectoral system, by saying that, as Hezron clearly pointed out, well, there are many relevant aspects for development or sustainable development that could be tackled by a sectoral system approach. For example, Hezron mentioned agriculture. Agriculture is a sectoral system of innovation, as specific technologies, specific way of production, of course, specific demand. So in a sense, it's a sectoral system of innovation, as Hezron has very well discussed it. But let me just mention other ones that could be very important for sustainable development. The green sectors that are so relevant for development for everybody are a specific sectoral systems of innovation. There are specific sectors with their own technologies, their own demand, and their own specificities. And actually, if you look at the specific countries that came up recently, you here have a key role of the government. The government also in terms of public procurement in these sectors, and also the supply side support. But again, green sectors are another example, together with agricultural sectoral systems. Another one is resources, resource-rich countries. Think of all these countries that are rich with natural resources. Again, it's a specific sectoral system. If you have to take into account and you want to examine this resource-rich sectors in countries, you have to take into account the lenses of a sectoral system, because they have a lot of specificities. I'm thinking of Brazil, but I think also Malaysia, Chile, and so on. So in a sense, again, the lenses of sectoral systems allow to identify the specificities of specific sectors that are important for development. Another one is services. We have been accustomed, particularly when I grew up, to focus a lot on manufacturing. And even the Pavitt taxonomy, the original Pavitt taxonomy was based on manufacturing. But services is key for the development of a lot of countries. Again, services are sector specific. You cannot examine services as in general, because their dynamics, their innovation, their demand, their technology are different. So, and let me conclude this kind of broad view is like, I think a lot of people have mentioned China and artificial intelligence and the fact that China is emerging as a leader. Again, artificial intelligence is sector specific. You have to examine artificial intelligence, specific, very broad, maybe general purpose, broad sector, but still it's a sector. So agriculture, green sectors, resource sectors, services, and artificial intelligence are all broad sectoral systems that are key for development of course, of different countries. And I think following what Hezron said, it could be very helpful to see them as a broad sectoral systems. Well, again, from Hezron's presentation, I think it has emerged that one of the strengths of the innovation system of the different dimensions, be the sectoral, the regional, the global, is the fact that they are strongly evidence-based and empirically grounded. I tell you that for you Globalist students is obvious. I grew up as an economist, and I was taught microeconomics and neoclassical economics. And evidence base was not that much required. You need a model, a clean model, and you put, very nice, where you have the almost economicals, the full rationality, equilibrium, whatever. Where is equilibrium? Find equilibrium. But what these approaches, the innovation system approaches, the different dimensions that Hezron discussed, but also the ones, the national innovation system, are very much evidence-based. They are empirically grounded. And I think this is so important for research. We learn so much when we start from examining specific cases, specific evidence, and then we eventually we go to appreciative theorizing on the links, the mechanism that are important. So I think this is a strength of the innovation system, and is also a strength of the explanation of the heterogeneity of innovation systems. There is a problem, though, analytically, and the problem, which is a good problem in a sense, we are all researchers and we try to solve these the problems, research question, is to examine and analyze dynamics and co-evolution. Again, it's quite easy to take a picture of a sectoral system or a regional system or a national system of a specific country. It's more difficult to examine the co-evolution of different actors that interact, that they do mutual learning, that they affect each other and so on, maybe examine the path dependency or whatever. So I say that because I think it's very important. When you talk about innovation, you talk about a dynamic phenomenon, something that puts in motion a lot of things, but also analytically could be difficult. I mean, it's both at the case level, when you do a case, examine how all these actors have interacted, how knowledge has flown, has been accumulated, and so on, and the co-evolution over time. And I think this is one of the challenges. I've been telling that over quite some time, to understand the process of system growth, system development, and so on. Also because a lot of these processes are uneven. Maybe some sectors grow more and other sectors grow less. Some regions within a country grow more and less. So not only the processes are uniform, but they lead to uneven processes. And I think it's very important. It's very important when you look at the development, the rising inequality, maybe across sectors, across region, even within a country. And I think this is, a very important challenge to look at the system in a dynamic, co-evolutionary way. And I mean, if we will have time in the discussion, I think there are various ways, you can do with cases, very detailed cases, which are, cases always teach us a lot of very important things. You can look at with network analysis, and again, we can discuss about that. Or you can look at, for example, with sectors with history-friendly models. When you do kind of simulation models, they take into account the evolution of a specific sector with interaction and so on. So kind of modeling a history-friendly type allow you to look at dynamics and evolution. But what I'm saying is that this is a very big challenge to look at how these different type of innovation systems, be the sectoral, be the regional, be the national, and so on, evolve, change, co-evolve over time, and what are the key mechanisms at the base of this evolution. Which again, listening to Hezron, also came to my mind that something that many of us has stressed, also in terms of policy, this idea of different dimensions of innovation system stresses definitely in terms of policy, the presence of some failures that are not just market failures, but can be evolutionary failures, system failures of various types, or capability failures. But if you take into account this point that you have different dimensions of innovation system, and that innovation system are heterogeneous. As Hezron was saying, you know, if you want to intervene in the pharmaceutical industry, it's very different if you want to intervene in textile or in agriculture. The tools, the type of intervention is absolutely different, which means that in terms of policy have to be aware of the specificities. We all like to have general policies. I mean, of course, we like the general policies and so on, but also the policymaker has to be aware of the specificity of the system in which you want to intervene. And there are lessons of policies that were acritically transferred from one sector to another sector and failed. Why? Because of course, a lot of policies maybe are targeted to a specific sector, broad sector. I'm not saying it could be agriculture, could be green, could be services, but then they may fail when they target to another sector, which I think this idea of this point that the different dimension of innovation system and the heterogeneity of the innovation system point to the fact that policies have always to be aware, not necessarily to be specific, I'm not saying not necessarily, but the awareness of the fact that you intervene on a system that could have some specificities and is different from other systems. I think it's very important. So I think I am maybe ready for some discussion. Let me just conclude the comment. Again, listening to Hezron, in a sense, analyzing innovation system required some interdisciplinarity. And I think Globalist students are aware of that. Of course, if you do a PhD, your professor pushes you to be narrow, to focus on a specific question, which is fine, you know, in a sense. When you're a student, you cannot tackle the whole set of broad questions. But what I'm telling you is that even if you focus on a narrow, specific topic for your PhD students or for your early studies, keep in mind the broad question. Keep in mind the broad question and be open, in a sense that this is very important. Because sometimes a young scholar is tangled between being very specific and be very, you know, narrow and contribute, and maybe he loses the ground and the interest and the focus on a broad question. So keep in mind the broad research questions that are related to innovation system, which means that you have to be open and often interdisciplinary in what you're going to search. So basically, I think I am done for some commenting some the excellent presentation of Hezron. I think we should open the discussion.
Thank you, Hezron, for a very excellent and very detailed presentation. And thank you, Professor Malerba. The discussion can be better. You have really added some of the most important points. Now, if I may request Professor Carletta Paris, if she would like to offer some comments. Hello?
Well, I think both the presentation by Hezron and Franco's comments are so rich that it's almost impossible to say anything they didn't say. Maybe I can make a point about something which has to do with the last thing that Franco said, and it also follows on Hezron's intention to look at all the elements that contribute. Because, you know, the problem with science is that we always want to find some regularities that really help us understand in a more general way what we're saying. And yet, because we are evidence-based, because we're trying to look at reality the way it is and not the way it looks when you do it with little numbers only, then it means that we have to face a particularly complex issue. We have, say we talk about sectoral systems and we say agriculture is a sector. By the way, thank you for mentioning that, because I think it's become a very important topic now to understand innovation in agriculture because of green, because we need to shift to more regenerative agriculture, because we now have the competition from laboratory meat and all these other things. And of course, within agriculture, we have cattle, we have different types of things. We can have avocado, but we also have rice, you know. So can we really say something about the, you know, like a sectoral system, or does it go down further, and then we have to distinguish between rice, avocados, and cattle? So we have a big problem. We have a lot of information that we have to handle, and we need to provide, because that's the whole idea, we need to provide guidance to policymakers, right? And to innovators, and we need to be able to help the actors in this game by providing recipes, some understanding of how the whole thing works. And I wanted to point to something, which is that if we look at agriculture in the 1870s to 90s, for instance, in the US, there was enormous innovation in agriculture, all sorts of, you know, the mechanization of agriculture, including the machines, became almost like consumer goods, you know. They were being changed all the time, and fertilizer, and the government brought the land grant universities to do research on agriculture. And then we have in the 1950s and 60s and on from there, what was called the Green Revolution, which was a way of making the perfect tomato, which was beautiful, perfect, long-lasting, and tasteless and nutritionless. So there was a whole range, and all these seeds and all these things, you know, this world of artificially creating these, almost turning agriculture into an industry. And now we have to turn it into green. So do we then study sectoral evolution also? I mean, it gets really complicated when we try to generalize, but we've got to try to generalize. And I think the most important way to generalize has to do with two things. One is the current, say, technological revolution and the way things are changing. We are trying to shape it towards sustainability. So maybe, as Franco suggested, we can't call it green because, you know, doing green materials or doing renewable energy or doing regenerative agriculture or doing, you know, they're all different. But green is like a general direction. So maybe we need to find some bigger boxes into which to put some of the general things so that we can actually be useful for governments, particularly in the developing world, because this is the time for promotion. Finally, we got rid of this free market madness, and we now need to go back to the idea of industrial policy, agricultural policy, green policy, social policy. I mean, governments have to become proactive again, and we've got to do it intelligently. And if there is one sector of social science that can be of enormous help, it's precisely innovation studies. So That's what I feel, and I would like to know whether Hezron sees the possibility of sort of putting together things the way, because I felt that's what he was trying to do, rather than separating. But it's not an easy task. So you're young, you'll get there.
Yeah, very right, Professor Perez. I was also thinking the same way we were thinking in terms of the agriculture sector and its broadness. Issues of maize are very different from issues like you say of like agroforestry or other kind of, animal keeping and so. But at the same time, even discussing agricultural innovation, yes, in some cases it's all about subsistence, taking the farm out of poverty, but sometimes it's also changing the world in terms of having some green way of doing farming and having more environmental friendly practices and so. So all these dimensions, when you try to bring them all together with different kind of missions, it becomes a robust kind of a research area. So sometimes treating these separately, agricultural innovation system as part of sectoral systems of innovation, a sector itself, like we say. But yeah, sometimes in some cases, it's very specific that you focus on a specific crop or specific issues within that sectoral system of innovation, and that becomes very important. In addition, you have pointed out some very important issues, and similarly also Franco. The whole need for we doing studies of innovation is talk about human development, but also sustainable development. So when we link these studies with the development issues, yes, reducing poverty, but at the same time, of course, making world a better place to be, dealing with environmental challenges, going green and things like that. I think these are very important issues when we talk about the importance of our field. So we study innovation for efficiency, for productivity, but at the same time to ensure that it's not just to have products going to the market, but to change lives of people, to have products which will then transform people's life, but at the same time, of course, to them being innovative and therefore being efficient and having their innovative activities changing their own lives. So green technologies, but also technological innovation as a factor for improving life, very important, I think. And Professor Perez and Professor Malerba, both of you have emphasized on this issue, which seems to have been also lacking in my lecture.
Thank you.
May I come in? Carlotta, it's always great to hear you. You are always inspiring all of us. I mean, you said very important things. I mean, I totally agree with you that, I mean, about the agricultural innovation system, and also this idea that you may find regularities and generalize, but also sometimes and very often you have to go very detailed. Rice versus tomatoes versus, so it's a level of analysis. You know, you may have different levels of analysis depending on the question or the policy question that you want to address. You made this great point about the evolution over time, because I agree that the spurs of innovation in the US were followed by other type of innovation, and now the green. So in a sense, you have some discontinuities at a certain moment of, as you have been writing for other sectors and also for this sector. In a sense, what happened before, let's say, the green revolution or whatever was this, I mean, you had some kind of destructive creation to make in a sense, and not and which put the system, let's say, backward to a certain level. But I agree with you that it's important to put everything together, and that the green revolution and sustainability are really new paradigms that have to lead us in the next years in terms of innovation and in terms also of system analysis. Thank you.
May I now invite Professor Bettina Diamet to offer some comments and suggestions?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, the organizers. Thank you, Franco and Hezron. I very much enjoyed your presentations. Yeah, I think you have said almost everything regarding systems of innovation. But I was thinking, I mean, I always think policy, even in academic discourse. How to compare, I think it should be a point of discussion also in systems in developed countries, where systems are strong, and system in poor countries where systems are very weak. As far as I know, is that the concept of national innovation system is an ex post phenomena, like looking at things that has already happened. But I'm not sure from the reading. I'm not sure whether we have tools for analysis in ex ante to actually use this concept to actually build weak systems. So my suggestion, what I've always said or even written is, I think we have some way in using the local system rather than national, which are so diverse. If I, like in Tanzania, so diverse in terms of economic activities. Even if you talk of agricultural sector, you have crops, that are completely different. You see, and they have unique, as discussed already, unique systems. So I think going down to local systems, it will really be very helpful to build the system. So I just wanted to, from your reading, what else do you think, how else do you think we can build weak systems by using the concept of systems of innovation, be it national, global, local, or sectoral? Thank you.
Well, Bettina, you are absolutely right. We learn a lot from ex post, from the cases and so on. But I would say that the enormous literature on national systems, also sectoral system, regional system, tell us that there are some, you call it regularities, that should be the starting point for policy, and which means that first of all that support learning of actors in various ways. You can have through development of education at the more sophisticated level, R&D, develop the capability building. Which, by the way, is not just technology. It's also absorptive capability, organizational capability, all these other dimensions that are important together with the technological capability. And the fact that actors are to be aligned. Misalignment of actors in a system could create problems even for actors that have some level of capabilities and have institutions institutions that support the system with an active government policy. Active government policy. This is very important. Of course, these are general lessons that Chris, Bentoke, Carlotta taught us, and so on. And of course, as you say, you have to then go down to the specificity of the specific maybe crop that you are having in agricultural system or local system in a specific area. And so it's the combination of the general lessons that you draw, that you can draw ex post from our understanding of the sector, the national, sectoral, regional, and so on, and their dynamics and evolution, the combination of these regularities and general lessons with the specificity of maybe the local system or the type of product, or what that then leads you to some policy indication, which again address very much the idea that heterogeneity and diversity is very important. You need to take into account when you do policies. You cannot just bring policies from one sector, country, and so on, and apply absolutely to another country, sector, or area. So it's this combination. I think it's very important. What we learn from the past and what the specificity of the local or specific sector or specific area that you want to intervene. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Malerba. May I now request Professor Edward Lawrence to offer his observations? Professor Lawrence.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation, which I found quite interesting. I find it very important that there's been a focus on agriculture. I think I just wanted to say I think we need to, as a community of scholars, maybe put more attention to agriculture. And it's obvious if you look at the populations that are, facing extreme hunger, and where the main problems of development are, it's in rural communities in certain parts of the world where the populations are dependent, smallholders dependent upon not cash crops, but food crops. And they live, in a very vulnerable and uncertain state. I think it's interesting. I think despite that obvious problem, there still seems to be too much focus on industry, what Franco was saying. And we keep thinking about, let's take the current buzz about the fourth industrial revolution. I mean, how relevant are these technologies? Some of them probably are to agriculture, maybe artificial intelligence and other kinds of geospatial kind of maps and so on could be very helpful. But there seems to be still this focus that if we can just somehow get our industry going, we're going to solve the problems. I think until the agricultural problems are solved, the development process will not succeed. It'll remain, or at best, it'll be a population divided between certain pockets of industrial development in certain regions of a country where things are moving forward, and a large share of the population in stagnation. So I would say, I think this is good to focus on agriculture, and I hope we do more of it. That's what I want to say.
Agree. So I think you are absolutely right, and even absolutely agriculture is a key big sector, but also services. I mean, if you think that manufacturing is such a limited share of an economy, very important. We all agree it's important. So in a sense, as you say, there is a lot of emphasis on maybe the manufacturing and not agriculture, nor services in general that could be very relevant. I totally agree with that.
I wanted to go back to something that I said in another seminar of this series, which is that we don't seem to study institutional innovation and policy innovation as such. I mean, we tell policymakers what you have to do is this and this and that, because that's how the innovation systems work. But we don't tell policymakers, and the way innovation is made in policy and in government and in institutions is like this, because we've studied it. Where are the case studies? What are we doing about this? Policy, science posts, political science people, they do a lot about how government, but they don't have the notion of innovation as something special, different from whatever policy is. We need that very much. I wish some young people would start doing case studies and centering on that, because this is the time for governments to act. And we can't just talk about producers. We've got to talk about the people who create the context where the producers can innovate. And that's very different if you're in an advanced country or you're in a developing country. You know, there are major differences. And of course, it also, there is a difference if you are trying to encourage innovation among peasants or you're encouraging innovation among some multinational global corporations. So the whole thing is very complex and we know very little about it.
Carlotta, you are so right. And I have nothing to add except by saying that adding the kind of innovation system and evolutionary theory, institutional innovation are so important to examine, but also the capability of the policymaker at various levels. Studies should be done in a sense because the government has some learning and capabilities, and absolutely capabilities of the policymaker is also very important in implementing policies. And studies should be devoted to the fact that those capabilities and those learning could be very different from country to country and affect the policy process.
Thank you. Professor Andrew Cummings has posted a number of questions in chat box. I would like to request him if he wants to ask them directly. Professor Cummings?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I would focus on one, which is trying to connect the sectorial or technological systems of innovation approach with the regional or local territorial systems approach, and wonder if you could talk about the territorialization of the sectoral systems as they evolve, how they are expressed territorially within countries and across countries seem to be especially relevant for development. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this nexus between the sectorial dynamics and how they're expressed in a territorial way.
So maybe I can start, and maybe Hezron may come in because for sure Hezron has a lot of things to say. Well, the territorial and Andrew, you posed a very relevant question, and in a sense, the sectoral system is a very the view of and the analysis of sectoral systems allow really to take into account these territorial dimensions. So let me explain, because absolutely some parts of a sectoral systems are related to global networks. Think of, the access to global pieces of information or science, the flow of information. So there are some parts that enter the sectoral system, maybe at the university level or at the company level or whatever, that are global. So in a sense, global networks. But also some parts of a sectoral systems have a very local character, in a sense that you cannot examine, for example, textile without taking into account, the clusters of production in certain areas. So there is this global and local dimension that could be accommodated easily in a sectoral system, because the sectoral system take into account the technology, production, and the market, or whatever kind of link, which and they not necessarily have to be national. They could be at the certain dimensions international or global. In other dimensions, they could be local. And again, I think a very important aspect of the analysis of sectoral system is to identify which are the elements or parts of the sectoral system that are global, that are inserted in maybe the global knowledge networks or global mobility of researchers or whatever, and which part of the sectoral system are local, that is, are clustered in specific areas. So Andrew, I think you pointed out this very important aspect of the link between the sectoral system and the territorial dimension. Thank you.
We are nearing 2 hours almost, so we can take a question, 1 or 2 more questions. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a small question to Carlota about innovation in policy. I would love if she can explain a bit, because I know innovation policy has been changing along with academic discourse. When it was linear model, actually policy was also nonlinear, emphasis on R&D. Systems of innovation and policies actually on systems, if you look at the policy making. So I would like her to explain a bit what she means by her.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to say is that I no longer believe that science and technology policy is something independent of national strategy, whatever, so it's no longer having a little science and technology instrument that's going to try to do a Silicon Valley thing or fund a little whatever. That should be over. We should have, should, of course, this idea that there is such a thing as the possibility of giving advice in this way of should is probably wrong, but I will anyway. I really think that if we don't have proper strategic visions that look forward and have, where are we going as a country or as a region or as a city or as a community, whatever, to have a strategy, to have a goal, and to have a way of going there. But every single strategy today, at whatever level, global, national, city, municipality, region, whatever, is a technology strategy. There is no way you can do today any successful strategy if it's not a technology strategy, because we are precisely at a moment when we are shifting to the proper use, the wide-ranging use of the information revolution and a whole new direction, which is both green and social sustainability, and the need for it to be global. We don't have time. I don't have time now to explain why, but it's good for the advanced world for once, in contrast with what it was during the 50s and 60s, that depended on low-cost raw materials. It doesn't anymore. The world needs demand of all sorts of things, especially capital goods and all those things. And to understand that and to work within that range and to understand that globalization has to be redesigned. It was only about cost before. Now it's going to be a very different thing. In fact, the pandemic showed us. So what we need to study now is actually, I don't know whether there are some examples of this thing no longer being separate. Science and technology policy as a little pocket issue on the side. And then you have the financial ministry that has nothing to do with technology. That's not possible anymore. So Vitrina, my answer is we need to actually look at any successful cases and any failed cases and why, of looking at the change as being centrally technological, even though it's going to be called a strategy. So it's a very difficult thing. Nobody's talking clearly about it. And we need to be the ones that talk clearly about it in every country, because we really need that. And then, of course, we can only talk about clearly if we study it. That's why I think innovation studies has to have this new object in sight.
Thank you. Now, one last question. We will give that to an young scholar. May I request Alamayu to place your observations? Hello? Are you there? So, okay, may I request the speaker and the chair to offer the concluding observations? We are nearing the time.
So Hezron.
Hezron, please.
Hezron, please.
It was a very useful discussion. To prepare for the lecture, of course, I had to go through a lot of literature. I learned a lot beyond what I knew. But even today, within the presentation, the senior scholars, Carlota, Litrina, Franco, and the others who contributed have also improved in my understanding of this learning. So we keep on learning in the network of Globalix, but also Africa. So I really appreciate this.
So if I want to add something to what Hezron said, I think the lecture was excellent. Was very clear, very comprehensive, and I think it linked different aspects of innovation system research in a very consistent way. And I really congratulate Hezron. I think also the discussion was very interesting. I think it raised a lot of different topics, issues that also, as I said when I commented Hezron presentation, represent challenges, big challenges for not only the mature scholars, but particularly the students and the young scholars, because Globalix is a very vibrant community, and every time I participate to a Globalix event, I'm always amazed by the ideas, the energy, and the enthusiasm that at all levels, particularly the young scholars have. So in a sense, they represent challenges, and I'm sure that the Globalist community will face it with a lot of energy. Let me just also say I want to thank Regis, that has been an excellent coordinator, and Kieran for his coordination of the questions and so on. So I think I enjoyed very much this session. I enjoyed very much the presentation, and I enjoyed very much the discussion. As I always say, we are an invisible college that is visible when we are able to interact, and we always learn from each other. So I hope to see you in person in November in Costa Rica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hezron, for a very excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Sorry, hello. Sorry, my connection is lost.
Thank you very much. I should have made a comment, but
bye, Mamo.
Bye. Sorry, there were other people also taking time, my time.
Yeah, Professor Mamo, you can speak. Why don't you speak? Please speak. Mamo, please.
You want me to?
Yeah.
You want me to speak? But I think no. But I think I think this network, the CRIS network, I like it to be developed like Globalix very much. I think it's a wonderful series of lectures that I am hearing, and it's also very interesting how all of us are, despite the fact that we are in the coronavirus, I'm able to see a really great opportunity to sorry, I think somebody else is
phone
speaking.
is ringing. The phone, yeah.
Yes, but I think my main sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
But hear you.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I think my main, I have a question to all of you. It's not to the presenter, but it's a question about the innovation system. I think now that we are having these challenges, like the climate change, global climate change, we have now the coronaviruses, health matters. I'm just wondering about all this, and still we haven't gone out of poverty, inequality, divisions. We haven't also gone out of the challenges of, rather than seeing ourselves as one human race, we also divide ourselves. We don't know how to universalize ourselves. Is there any way by which we can reconceptualize the whole innovation system to help us to innovate out of these dilemmas and problems? And instead of helping us solve one problem and create another problem, why don't we find a unified approach, an Einstein type theory, yeah, where we can try to solve problems? Einstein said there are two infinites in this universe, in the world. One is the universe, the other is human stupidity. He says he's not sure about the universe, but he was very sure that human stupidity is infinite. So I like us to think a way of how we can apply innovation to re-innovate entirely out of the very many challenges the world is in at the moment. Is there any way we can reconceptualize and create what Charles Edquist said, the holistic theory of innovation, something like that? Bring in the sectoral innovation, unify Franco Malerba, all right, and Bentoke and everybody else, yeah, Carlota Perez, all of you. Is there any way to unite you to find a unified theory of innovation? What do you think about that? That's it's just a provocation.
I think this is the best way to conclude the session, because you posed big questions, and you know, and we will all think about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rajesh.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Good, Mamo. Can you hear me?
Kiran,
Yes,
Kiran,
I think
please. You're audible. You're audible.
Is that Bal?
Kiran, you can speak. Kiran, you can speak.
Yes. Before. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm speaking. Yeah. Can you hear? Hello. Can you hear?
We can. We can.
Hello?
Please speak. We can.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Rajesh. So I have two announcements to make. We are going to have our next lecture, the 8th in the series, on application of national systems of innovation by two speakers. One is Dr. Kenneth Fung and Dr. Giffey Boyoke, and it is going to be chaired by Professor Mamo Mushi, and the moderator is by Namita Pandey from ISC India. So we are going to have two panel discussions. One is on 1st April, that is going to be on development and global south. And the second panel discussion is going to be on 7th April, on theory and foundations. So we request the senior scholars to post 20 questions or post questions. So we will be deliberating on the 20 select questions. The email ID for posting the questions is chris.innovationstudies@gmail.com, and please mark question in the subject of your email while sending your questions. Thank you. And before we close, may I request all of you to unmute and say hi.
Hi.
Take care.
Sure.
It's been great to see you.
Hey, Franco.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Let us all unmute.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for a good lecture.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. It was a very nice lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Great lecture and great sharing. We enjoyed.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Kiran, thank you for managing the whole thing. Thank you very much.
Good lecture, Rajesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Alex, thank you very much.
Yes, good. See you then.
See you, sir. See you. See you then.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Betrina, are you still there, Betrina? She left. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks, Hezron. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you, Rajesh, Hezron, and also Indu.
Thank you very much, Franco.
Franco.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you, Franco?
Alexander, how are you? Great to see you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. You look great.
Yeah. Good to hear you.
Yes,
Very
yes.
good.
Great to hear from you. And okay, I hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Great.
Hope in Costa Rica.
Yes, hopefully in Costa Rica. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We should cross our fingers, but I think we will make it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's complicated, but
it's very important that we see each other in presence and not just through the web or whatever.
Yeah. It's true.
Okay, guys.
We
going.
need a projection of
optimism. Bye.
Globally.
Thank you so much. Next week, next Friday, we meet again. Next Friday.
Yes. Take care, all of you.
Next Friday.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. So Hezron, we are planning, as Kiran announced, we are planning two panel discussions on 1st of April and 7th of April.
Sure.
So we need good questions. So please
I will
mobilize
try to.
questions.
Sure, Rajesh.
So what we plan is organize these questions in a what you call logical sequence.
Yeah.
Send the questions to the panels well in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Give them time to prepare answers, and we discuss it.
Sure.
Over 2 hours, maybe up to 2 hours 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very brilliant